about what has happened and what's been going on.
It's wild to me that you think I lie because I think you're manipulating.
Well, tell me how I'm manipulating. Oh, no. Tell the whole world.
Imagine spending nearly 3 decades inside a relationship that defined your entire adult life, walking away, rebuilding yourself, and then, when absolutely nobody expects it, introducing the world to someone new. That is exactly what just happened with Sister Wives star Janelle Brown. And this time, it isn't a rumor, a fan theory, or another blurry photo. Janelle has officially gone public with her new boyfriend, and his name is Pete. But here's the part that makes this story so interesting. Janelle didn't simply post a random picture with a man. Her message suggests that this relationship developed quietly, unexpectedly, and at a point in her life when she wasn't even searching for romance. And after everything Janelle experienced with Kody Brown, that detail may be more important than the relationship announcement itself. Because Janelle isn't presenting Pete as some dramatic replacement for Kody, she's presenting him as something she never expected to find. And that has Sister Wives fans asking one huge question: what happens now that Janelle has truly started a new chapter? The announcement nobody saw coming on August 18, 2026, Janelle surprised her followers by sharing a photo with Pete and publicly confirming that she is in a relationship. Her caption was deeply personal. She explained that some chapters are meant to develop privately before they are shared with everyone. She also admitted that she wasn't looking for this relationship and certainly wasn't expecting it. But somehow, Pete became exactly what she didn't realize she needed. And then came the line that immediately caught fans' attention.
Everyone please meet Pete.
Think about how different this is from the Janelle fans watched for years. For so much of Sister Wives, Janelle was portrayed as practical, independent, financially minded, and often willing to tolerate difficult circumstances for the sake of the larger family. Romance was not always the center of her story. Her relationship with Kody had existed for decades, beginning with their spiritual marriage in 1993. Together, they raised 6 children. But by December 2022, Janelle confirmed that she and Kody had separated. Now, almost 4 years later, she has publicly introduced another man into her life. And that timeline makes this announcement even more significant because Janelle didn't rush into another relationship. In fact, she previously made it very clear that she wasn't interested in dating. This is one of the most fascinating parts of the entire story. Janelle had previously spoken about dating after Kody, and her attitude was basically, no thanks. She wasn't interested in online dating. She didn't want to swipe through dating apps. She didn't want the pressure of trying to meet somebody. And she certainly didn't appear to be desperate to replace the relationship she had lost. In a 2023 conversation featured on Sister Wives, Janelle explained that dating simply wasn't something she wanted to pursue at that point. That makes her latest announcement feel completely different because, according to Janelle herself, she wasn't hunting for love. Love apparently found her. And that is exactly why fans are reacting so strongly. There is something emotionally powerful about watching someone who once seemed finished with romance suddenly realize that maybe life still has another surprise waiting. If you thought the announcement was already surprising, there was another detail fans immediately noticed. Christine Brown approves. Christine, who knows Janelle better than most people outside her immediate family, jumped into the comments with support for the new couple. She reportedly called Pete an awesome guy and said that Janelle and Pete were very cute together. But Christine also revealed something fans found especially interesting. Pete works in construction, just like Christine's husband, David Woolley. Now, does that mean anything bigger? Not necessarily. But Sister Wives fans obviously noticed the connection. Christine has already successfully rebuilt her life after Kody. She found a new partner, remarried, and moved into a very different chapter. And now Janelle appears to be experiencing something similar. That creates a fascinating contrast with the man they both once shared as a husband. For years, Christine and Janelle were connected through Kody's plural marriage. Today, both women have moved forward into relationships outside of that family structure, and Janelle's latest announcement makes that transformation impossible to ignore. But what about Kody? Of course, there is one person whose reaction fans are desperate to know about. Kody Brown, because whether Kody comments publicly or not, Janelle introducing Pete changes the emotional landscape of their story. For years, viewers watched Kody and Janelle navigate disagreements about family priorities, communication, living arrangements, and eventually their separation. Their relationship slowly became one of the major casualties of the collapse of the Brown family's plural marriage structure. And now Janelle isn't simply living independently. She's publicly telling the world, I'm with someone, I'm happy, and I'm ready for this chapter. That is a very different message. And here's where we have to separate fact from speculation. There is currently no verified public statement from Kody saying how he feels about Pete. So if you see headlines claiming that Kody is furious, devastated, jealous, or in shambles, remember that those are reactions being imagined or speculated about by fans and media, not confirmed statements from Kody himself. But that doesn't mean viewers aren't going to wonder, because Janelle's announcement represents something much bigger than a boyfriend reveal. It represents moving on. This may actually be the most important part of the story. Pete is obviously the headline, but Janelle's transformation is the real story. For decades, her identity was connected to being one of Kody Brown's wives. Then the family fell apart. Christine left. Janelle separated. Mary eventually ended her relationship with Kody as well. And suddenly, the plural family that had been the center of Sister Wives for years was no longer functioning in the way viewers originally knew it. Robin remained with Kody while the other women began creating independent lives. Janelle's journey has been particularly interesting because she didn't appear to need another relationship to prove that she was happy. She built her own life. She stayed connected with her children and grandchildren. She made major changes. And now, apparently, romance has simply become another part of that life. That's an important distinction. Janelle isn't saying, I need someone because I'm alone. Her message is closer to, well, I wasn't expecting this, but I'm happy it happened. And honestly, that might be why fans are celebrating her so intensely. There is another reason this announcement could become huge for Sister Wives content. The Brown family has already been navigating what comes next for the franchise with season 21 discussions and speculation surrounding the cast's future. And now, right in the middle of that conversation, Janelle has revealed a relationship that fans never saw coming. That raises a lot of questions. Will Pete appear on the show? Will viewers get to see how Janelle met him? How long have they actually been together? What does her family think? How does Kody feel? Will Christine and David spend time with Janelle and Pete? And perhaps the biggest question, is Janelle's new relationship going to become part of the next chapter of Sister Wives? At this point, we should not pretend we know answers that haven't been officially confirmed. But the timing is certainly creating enormous curiosity. And that curiosity is exactly what makes this story so powerful. Because fans aren't just interested in who Pete is, they're interested in what Pete represents. He represents a Janelle fans haven't seen before for years. Viewers watched Janelle compromise. They watched her defend aspects of plural marriage. They watched her struggle with the breakdown of the family. They watched her relationship with Kody deteriorate. And eventually, they watched her choose herself. Now, for the first time, fans are getting a glimpse of Janelle in a completely different kind of romantic chapter. Not as Kody's second wife, not as part of a plural marriage, not as one piece of a complicated family structure, just Janelle. And that's why this announcement feels bigger than a simple celebrity relationship reveal. It feels like a full circle moment, but there's still one massive mystery. Who exactly is Pete? What do we know about him? How did Janelle meet him? Why did she keep the relationship private for so long? And why did she suddenly decide that August 2026 was the right moment to introduce him to the world? Those are the questions fans are now trying to piece together. And if Janelle's own words are anything to go by, the answer may be even more unexpected than people realize. Because she says she wasn't looking, she wasn't expecting him, and yet somehow Pete became exactly what she didn't know she needed. And that is where Janelle Brown's new story really begins. Who exactly is Pete? Because Janelle didn't simply reveal that she was dating. She introduced a man who had apparently been part of her life privately, while millions of viewers were still watching her journey after Kody Brown. And that raises an even bigger question. How did Janelle manage to keep this relationship so private? For someone whose personal life has been documented on television for years, keeping a serious relationship away from cameras, headlines, and constant fan speculation is no small achievement. And perhaps that's exactly why Janelle's announcement feels so different. Janelle has spent years living under a microscope. Her marriage to Kody was filmed. Her children grew up around the cameras. Her disagreements with Kody became television storylines. Her separation became a major part of Sister Wives. Even her plans for the future became something fans debated online. So when Janelle says this new relationship developed privately, it tells us something important. That's a major change. For years, viewers were invited into Janelle's family life. This time, Janelle apparently decided that she would choose when and how fans met the person she was dating. And honestly, after everything she has been through, it's hard to blame her. Another thing fans should be careful about is treating Pete like some kind of replacement Kody. That's not how Janelle appears to be framing it, and that's important. Janelle isn't comparing the two men. She isn't saying Pete is better than Kody. She isn't saying she finally found the perfect man after escaping a bad relationship. Instead, the tone of her announcement is much more personal. She seems to be saying that life surprised her. She wasn't searching for another relationship. She wasn't trying to prove something. She simply met someone and discovered that she was open to love again. That distinction makes the story much more meaningful because Janelle's happiness doesn't depend on whether Pete is better than Kody. Her happiness comes from the fact that she finally gets to choose what her life looks like. Now let's talk about the reaction that may actually tell us more than people realize. Kody Brown's reaction. Kody and Janelle have remained extremely close despite everything that happened with Kody. Their friendship survived the collapse of the Brown family's plural marriage. They've supported each other's new lives. And now Kody is openly celebrating Janelle's relationship. That's significant. Kody has already experienced her own post-Kody transformation. She left the plural marriage. She eventually met David Woolley and she married him. So Kody knows what it's like to step into a completely different kind of relationship after spending decades inside the Brown family structure. Now she's watching Janelle do something similar. And rather than questioning it, Kody appears genuinely happy for her. She even reportedly joked about Pete's construction background being similar to David's. Extra be calm. That little detail may seem insignificant, but for longtime Sister Wives viewers, it almost feels symbolic. Kody and Janelle once shared the same husband. Now they each have partners of their own, and their friendship continues. Think back to the early years of Sister Wives. The central question was always, how can one family make plural marriage work? Kody was at the center. The wives were connected through him. Their children were connected through the family. Their homes, finances, holidays, disagreements, and decisions were all intertwined. But now look at the picture in 2026. Kody has David. Janelle has Pete. Mary has built her own independent life, and Kody and Robin remain together. That's a completely different family structure. The women who once had to navigate their lives around the same husband are now increasingly defining themselves outside that relationship, and Janelle's announcement makes that transformation impossible to miss. This is where things get really interesting because announcing Pete publicly and bringing Pete onto television are two completely different decisions. Janelle may decide that the relationship is hers and doesn't need to become a storyline, or she may eventually allow viewers to meet him. And if Pete does appear on camera, the reaction is going to be enormous. Imagine the first scene, Janelle sitting down with Kody asking her how they met. Janelle smiling and talking about how she never expected to find someone. Then Pete walks into the room. For longtime viewers, that moment would be huge because they'd finally be seeing Janelle in a romantic relationship that has nothing to do with Kody. But there's another possibility. Janelle could keep Pete mostly outside the show, and honestly, that might be the healthiest choice if she wants to protect the relationship. We simply don't know yet. There hasn't been enough official information to say that Pete will definitely become a major season 21 cast member. So any headline claiming that he is joining Sister Wives should be treated carefully unless TLC or Janelle confirms it. We know Janelle has gone public. We know she's happy. We know Kody supports the relationship. And we know Janelle wasn't actively searching for a new romance. That's already a major change. But fans aren't just asking about Pete. They're also looking backward because once someone begins a new relationship, people naturally start reconsidering the old one. And that brings us straight back to Kody. Let's be very clear here. Kody's reaction has not been publicly confirmed, so we're not going to invent a dramatic response and present it as fact. But emotionally, the situation is fascinating. Kody spent decades believing that his relationships with his wives were permanent. Even after separations began, the Brown family story continued to revolve around the consequences of those breakups. Now, Janelle is publicly introducing another man. That changes the narrative. She isn't waiting for reconciliation. She isn't hinting that she wants Kody back. She isn't sitting around wondering what might have been. She's moving forward. And that is perhaps the strongest message she could send without saying anything directly to Kody. There is another development that makes the timing even more significant. Janelle has also spoken about receiving a spiritual release from her church, effectively closing another part of the spiritual connection she had with Kody. That was already a major step because leaving a plural marriage isn't simply about moving out of a house or ending a relationship. For Janelle, there was also a spiritual dimension. Now she's publicly dating someone new. Put those two developments together and the picture becomes much clearer. Janelle isn't simply physically separated from Kody. She's continuing to create a life that is independent from the old structure. And Pete appears to be part of that new life. Janelle's relationship with her children has always been one of the most important parts of her story. Her kids have watched their parents' relationship change. They've witnessed conflict. They've experienced the family breaking apart. And they've watched their mother rebuild herself. So imagine what it must feel like for them to see their mother genuinely happy again. We should be careful not to speak for Janelle's children or claim exactly what they think without direct statements from them. But it's easy to understand why fans see this as a potentially emotional moment because Janelle isn't just starting over romantically. She's showing her family that life after a painful chapter can still contain something unexpected. The most fascinating thing about Pete isn't necessarily his background. It's what his presence represents in Janelle's story. He arrived after Janelle had already learned how to stand on her own. That's important. She didn't need a man to escape Kody. She had already left. She didn't need Pete to build an independent life. She had already done that. She didn't need another relationship to prove she was happy. She had already begun creating happiness on her own. So if Pete is now part of that life, it's not because Janelle needed rescuing. It's because she apparently found someone she genuinely wanted to share her life with, and that is a very different kind of love story, Kody's behavior. Not because we know how he feels, we don't, but because Sister Wives has always been about relationships, and this announcement creates a completely new dynamic. For years, Kody's relationships with the women dominated the story. Now the women are building relationships that don't include him. Christine already crossed that line, Mary has moved forward, and now Janelle has publicly crossed it too. That leaves Kody and Robin standing on the other side of a family transformation that has been years in the making. And if season 21 continues documenting this transition, viewers could potentially see a very different version of the Brown family. What if Pete isn't just a temporary relationship? What if this isn't Janelle's dating after Kody phase? What if this is actually the beginning of the most serious romantic chapter of her life? Because Janelle's wording suggests that this relationship means something. She didn't hide it forever. She didn't casually mention him. She introduced him. She essentially told her followers, this is Pete. And that simple introduction has opened the door to hundreds of questions. How long have they been together? When did they meet? Who introduced them? How did Janelle's children react? Has Kody met Pete? Will Pete appear on television? And most importantly, is Janelle finally ready to build the kind of relationship she always wanted? We don't have all those answers yet. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Janelle Brown isn't looking backward. She's looking forward. And after everything we've watched her experience, that may be the biggest Sister Wives update of all. Because for years, fans wondered whether Janelle would ever truly walk away from the Brown family's old way of life. Now she has. And she isn't walking away alone. She's walking into something new. And the next question is the one nobody can stop talking about. What happens when Kody finally has to watch Janelle live a life that no longer revolves around him? For years, one question followed Janelle Brown everywhere. Would she ever really move on from Kody? Not just physically, not just by living somewhere else, but emotionally. Would she finally build a life where Kody was no longer the person setting the emotional temperature? Now, in August 2026, we may finally have the answer. Janelle has introduced Pete, and while fans are naturally focused on the new relationship, the bigger story is what this moment says about Janelle herself. Because Janelle didn't wait for Kody to give her closure, she didn't wait for an apology, she didn't wait for him to change. She didn't wait for the Brown family to become what it once was. She built a new life anyway. And that may be the part of this story Kody cannot control. When viewers watched Janelle's relationship with Kody deteriorate, there were no easy answers. This wasn't a short-term romance ending after a few months. Janelle and Kody had been spiritually married since 1993. They had 6 children together. Their lives were intertwined for decades. Their relationship survived moves, financial struggles, family disagreements, jealousy, religious expectations, and the complicated reality of plural marriage. So when Janelle finally confirmed their separation, it wasn't simply, we're breaking up. It represented the end of an entire way of life. And that's why Janelle's transformation has taken time. She had to figure out who she was outside that structure. She had to figure out where she wanted to live. She had to redefine her priorities. And most importantly, she had to learn that being alone didn't mean being incomplete. Janelle wasn't searching for a new husband. She wasn't desperately trying to get back into the dating world. In fact, she had previously been open about not being interested in online dating or actively searching for someone. And then Pete appeared. That's what makes this relationship so different. It wasn't necessarily the result of Janelle deciding, I need a boyfriend. Instead, it appears to have happened naturally. And that makes the timing even more powerful because Janelle had already become independent before Pete entered the picture. Some fans may compare Janelle's journey with Christine's. It's understandable. Christine left Kody. Christine eventually met David. Christine remarried, and now Janelle has publicly introduced Pete. But their stories aren't identical. Christine's relationship became highly visible and eventually turned into a major part of the Sister Wives storyline. Janelle may choose a different path. She could allow fans to see Pete, or she could keep most of their relationship private. And after years of having her personal life filmed and analyzed, perhaps privacy is exactly what she wants. The important point is that Janelle gets to decide. That's the difference. Let's imagine the emotional shift. For years, Kody was able to frame the Brown family around his relationships with his wives. Even when the marriages were falling apart, the story remained connected to him. Christine leaving was about Kody and Christine. Mary's ending was about Kody and Mary. Janelle's separation was about Kody and Janelle. But now something has changed. Janelle's story doesn't require Kody anymore. Her new chapter can simply be Janelle and Pete. And that may be one of the most significant developments in the entire Sister Wives franchise. Because when a person stops defining their life around an old relationship, the old relationship loses its power over the story. This is worth repeating because the internet can move very quickly. There are already going to be headlines claiming Kody is furious. Others may say he's heartbroken. Some will predict jealousy. Others will claim he's completely indifferent. But unless Kody himself confirms his feelings, none of those reactions should be treated as fact. What we do know is that Janelle has publicly moved forward. And sometimes a person's actions tell a story without requiring a dramatic confrontation. This may be the most powerful part. For decades, Janelle lived within a complicated family structure. Her choices affected other wives. Other wives' choices affected her. Kody's decisions affected everybody. Even basic family decisions could become complicated. Now, Janelle can make decisions based primarily on what she wants. If she wants to travel, she can travel. If she wants to live somewhere new, she can. If she wants to spend time with her children and grandchildren, she can. And if she wants to fall in love again, she can do that too. Pete's arrival is therefore more than a romantic development. It's evidence of personal freedom. One reason fans connect so strongly with Janelle is that she has always been seen as the practical one. She wasn't usually the loudest person in the room. She wasn't constantly demanding attention. She often seemed to approach problems logically, but beneath that practicality was a woman who experienced enormous emotional upheaval. The collapse of the Brown family affected her. The breakdown of her relationship with Kody affected her. The conflicts involving her children affected her. And yet she continued moving forward. Now, instead of another family crisis being the headline, she's giving fans something completely different: happiness. What does Pete bring into this? That's still one of the biggest unanswered questions. We know Janelle is publicly acknowledging him. We know Christine has reacted positively, but fans still don't know everything about their relationship, and that's probably intentional. Janelle has every reason to protect something that feels meaningful. Remember, this is a woman whose marriage was filmed for years. Every disagreement could become television. Every family problem could become a headline. Every statement could be analyzed by thousands of viewers. So perhaps keeping Pete away from the spotlight was her way of making sure this relationship could grow without outside pressure. Then, when she felt ready, she opened the door. That's actually a very healthy way to handle public relationships. Now we're getting into the possibilities fans are dying to see. Imagine Janelle bringing Pete around her children. Imagine Christine meeting him. Imagine David and Pete having a conversation. Imagine the Brown grandchildren meeting him. And then imagine Kody seeing all of this from the outside. Again, none of this should be presented as something that's definitely going to happen. But from a storytelling perspective, it would completely change Sister Wives, because the show would no longer be centered around whether the old family can be repaired. Instead, we'd be watching former sister wives create completely separate futures. Janelle's daughter, Madison, has been increasingly outspoken about her childhood and her adult life. Recently, Madison described aspects of her childhood as chaotic and suggested that she may eventually tell more of her story. That has naturally made fans curious about what she thinks of the changes happening in her mother's life. But again, we should not put words in Madison's mouth. Unless she directly comments on Pete, we don't know her private reaction. What we can say is that Janelle's children have watched this transformation from much closer than the audience ever could. And that makes Janelle's new chapter especially meaningful. Season 21 is expected to continue the Brown family's evolving story, although TLC's official plans and exact premiere details should always be checked before treating online rumors as confirmed. If the new relationship becomes part of the show's narrative, producers have a fascinating storyline sitting right in front of them, because Pete isn't just Janelle's boyfriend. He's potentially the first major romantic figure in Janelle's life after Kody. That means his presence could symbolize the complete end of one era. But there is also another possibility. Maybe Janelle decides that Pete doesn't belong on television at all. And if she does, that decision would say something too. It would show that Janelle has learned the difference between sharing her life and giving the entire world access to it. This is where her growth becomes impossible to miss. The Janelle viewers met years ago was deeply invested in the family structure. She believed in the principle of plural marriage. She believed in the family. She wanted the relationships to work. Even when things became difficult, she didn't immediately walk away. But today's Janelle seems much more focused on herself, not selfishly, healthily. She appears to understand that loyalty to a family doesn't require sacrificing your own happiness indefinitely. And that's a lesson many viewers can relate to, regardless of whether they have ever experienced plural marriage. And this is where I think fans sometimes miss the bigger picture. People are asking, is Pete the man Janelle will marry? Maybe, maybe not. It's too early to know, but that isn't actually the most important question. The important question is, who has Janelle become? Because even if this relationship eventually changes, Janelle has already changed. She has learned to live independently. She has established her own identity. She has moved beyond the relationship that once defined her. And now she's allowing herself to experience something new. That's growth. It's Janelle's lack of dependence on it. For years, fans watched women in the Brown family struggle with Kody's attention. Who was getting enough time? Who was being heard? Who felt neglected? Who was included? Who was left out? But Janelle's current story doesn't revolve around any of those questions. Her story is becoming, what do I want? That's a completely different question. And perhaps that's why her new relationship feels so refreshing. Again, we shouldn't speculate about their private feelings, but structurally, the Brown family has changed dramatically. Kody and Robin remain together. Christine has David. Mary has her own independent life. Janelle now has Pete. And the adult children are increasingly creating their own families and identities. The original Sister Wives dream is almost unrecognizable. And Janelle's new relationship may be one of the final pieces of evidence that the old family structure is truly gone. That's the question. Because if Janelle wasn't looking for someone, then what happened? Was it through friends, through work, through family? Did somebody introduce them? Was it completely accidental? And how long did Janelle know Pete before she decided to make the relationship public? Those details could completely change how fans understand this romance. Because right now we're seeing the result, but we haven't seen the beginning. And that beginning could be the most fascinating part of the entire story. For almost 30 years, Kody was part of Janelle's story. Now he isn't. And that's not necessarily a tragedy. It may actually be the victory. Janelle's new life doesn't erase the past. It doesn't mean the decades she spent with Kody meant nothing. It simply means those decades no longer determine what happens next. And Pete may be the person standing beside her as she begins that next chapter. But whether he becomes a lifelong partner or simply an important part of this period, one thing is already clear. Janelle isn't waiting for the old life to come back. She's moving forward. And that's exactly why this announcement has struck such a nerve with Sister Wives fans. Because after years of watching relationships fall apart, Viewers are finally watching one of the original Brown wives discover what life can look like after the dust settles. And there is still one huge piece of this story we haven't uncovered. What happens when Janelle's new relationship becomes impossible for the Brown family and the Sister Wives audience to ignore? After everything Janelle Brown has experienced, perhaps the most surprising part of this entire story isn't that she found someone new. It's that she found him after she had already learned how to be completely independent. For years, Sister Wives fans watched Janelle's life revolve around a complicated family structure. She was one of Kody Brown's wives. She was a mother of 6. She was part of a family that was supposed to remain together forever. But eventually, that dream changed. Christine left, Mary's relationship with Kody ended, Janelle separated from Kody, and the Brown family that viewers once knew slowly became something completely different. Now, Janelle has introduced Pete. And suddenly, we're not talking about whether Janelle can survive after Kody. We're talking about something much more exciting. What could her life look like now that she no longer has to? Let's put the romance aside for a moment. Before Pete ever entered the picture, Janelle had already accomplished something incredibly important. She learned how to live independently. That may sound simple, but for someone who spent decades inside a plural marriage, it wasn't necessarily easy. Janelle had to redefine her identity. She had to accept that the family structure she once believed would last forever had changed. She had to navigate the emotional consequences of separating from someone she had known for decades. And she had to continue being a mother and grandmother while rebuilding her own life. She did all of that. So Pete isn't the reason Janelle is strong. Pete is simply part of the life she built after becoming strong. And that distinction matters. The internet loves comparisons. Kody versus Pete, old husband versus new boyfriend, past versus future. But Janelle doesn't need that comparison. Her relationship with Kody belongs to her past. Whatever happens with Pete belongs to her future. And the two things don't need to compete. The real victory is that Janelle is finally allowed to experience a relationship without having to fit it into the rules of plural marriage. She doesn't have to wonder whether another wife is getting more attention. She doesn't have to negotiate a complicated family schedule. She doesn't have to explain why she deserves affection. She can simply decide whether the relationship works for her. That's freedom. Christine's reaction is another reason fans are celebrating. The friendship between Christine and Janelle has survived one of the most dramatic transformations in the Sister Wives story. They once shared a husband. Now they each have separate romantic lives. Christine has David, Janelle has Pete, and instead of competing, they appear to be supporting each other. That is a remarkable evolution. The old family structure connected them through Kody. Their current friendship connects them because they genuinely care about each other, and that may actually be stronger. It's impossible to know exactly where this relationship will go. Anyone claiming to know that Pete is definitely Janelle's future husband would be getting ahead of the available information. But Janelle's decision to publicly introduce him is meaningful. She could have kept the relationship completely private. Instead, she chose to share it. That suggests she's comfortable enough with Pete to let the public know he exists. And after years of reality TV scrutiny, that's not a small decision. The biggest question, will we see Pete on television? This could become one of the biggest questions surrounding the next chapter of Sister Wives. If Pete agrees to appear on camera, fans are going to want to know everything. How did they meet? What does he think about Janelle's history? Has he watched Sister Wives? How does he feel about the Brown family's complicated past? What does Janelle's family think about him? And perhaps most importantly, how does Pete fit into Janelle's life today? But if Janelle decides to keep Pete away from the cameras, that deserves respect too. A public figure is still entitled to have private relationships. And considering how much of Janelle's life has already been shared with viewers, perhaps this is one chapter she wants to control herself. Kody's role in this story is complicated, not because we know what he's thinking, we don't, but because for decades he was central to Janelle's life. Now he isn't. That's a massive shift. And even without a dramatic confrontation, viewers can understand why this would feel like the closing of a chapter. Janelle isn't asking Kody what she should do. She's not waiting for him to approve her choices. She's not waiting for the Brown family to return to what it once was. She's simply living. And sometimes that's the loudest statement someone can make. Think about how much of Sister Wives has revolved around conflict, arguments, broken relationships, jealousy, family divisions, money, moving, children caught between adults, and eventually separation. But Janelle's current chapter gives the franchise something different: hope. She isn't pretending the past didn't happen. She isn't rewriting history. She's simply proving that the end of one relationship doesn't have to be the end of your story. That's a message that extends far beyond reality television. The original Sister Wives family was built around plural marriage. That's what made the show unique. 4 wives, 1 husband, 1 enormous family. But today's reality is very different. Christine has left and remarried. Mary has built her own life. Janelle has separated and now has Pete. Kody's household with Robin remains. And the adult children are creating families and identities of their own. The Brown family's future is no longer about preserving the exact structure that existed at the beginning of the show. It's about what happens after that structure breaks apart, and Janelle may be one of the clearest examples of that transformation. What about season 21? This is where fans should stay realistic. There have been plenty of online theories and reports about season 21, but viewers should distinguish confirmed TLC information from fan speculation. If the new relationship is featured, it could provide one of the show's most compelling storylines. But if it isn't, Janelle's real-life announcement still stands on its own. Either way, fans are likely to be watching closely, because now every update from Janelle has a different meaning. A vacation could be a clue. A family gathering could be a clue. A picture with Pete could be a clue. And if Pete ever appears alongside Christine, David, or Janelle's children, the internet will explode. This is perhaps the most important message of all. Don't make the mistake of believing that Janelle's happy ending began when she met Pete. It began much earlier. It began when she realized that she could walk away. It continued when she built a life of her own. It continued when she stopped depending on the old family structure to define her. And now Pete is part of that journey. That's why this relationship feels different. Janelle isn't being rescued. She's not starting from zero. She's starting from experience. Maybe Pete will become Janelle's lifelong partner. Maybe they'll eventually take another step together. Maybe they'll keep their relationship private. Maybe their story will become part of Sister Wives. Or maybe it will remain completely separate from television. We don't know. And honestly, that's okay, because the most beautiful part of this story isn't knowing exactly what happens next. It's watching Janelle finally have the freedom to decide what happens next. So where does this leave Kody with a past relationship? That's it. Whatever Kody feels about Janelle's new relationship is ultimately his own story to tell. But Janelle's story doesn't need his reaction. That's the difference. She doesn't need him to be jealous. She doesn't need him to be angry. She doesn't need him to regret anything. She doesn't even need him to acknowledge Pete. Her life can continue regardless. And that's something Janelle may not have always had the freedom to say. At the beginning of this 4-part story, we asked, who is Pete? But maybe we've been asking the wrong question. The better question is, who is Janelle now? She's a woman who spent decades inside a relationship that once defined her. She's a mother who continued supporting her family through enormous change. She's a grandmother building memories with the next generation. She's a woman who chose independence, and now she's someone who has allowed herself to fall in love again. That's a powerful evolution. Janelle didn't need to rush. She didn't immediately jump into another marriage. She didn't need to prove anything to Kody. She didn't need to compete with Christine. She didn't need to convince fans that she was happy. She simply lived. And then when the right moment apparently came, she said, meet Pete. That's it. No huge revenge speech, no dramatic confrontation, no public attack, just a new chapter. And sometimes the quietest endings are the most powerful ones. If you've watched Sister Wives from the beginning, you've watched Janelle change. You've watched her believe in plural marriage. You've watched her defend the family. You've watched her struggle. You've watched her separate from Kody. You've watched her rebuild. And now you're watching her take another step forward. Pete may become an important part of her future. But regardless of what happens with this relationship, Janelle has already accomplished something bigger. She discovered that her identity doesn't depend on being someone's wife. She can simply be Janelle Brown. And perhaps that's the real ending to the Kody chapter, not anger, not revenge, not another argument, just moving forward. So what happens next? Will Pete eventually appear on Sister Wives? Will Janelle reveal how they met? Will her children open up about the relationship? Will Christine and David spend more time with the new couple? And eventually, will Kody break his silence? Those questions remain open. But one thing is already clear. Janelle Brown is no longer waiting for the life she once imagined. She's building a new one. And this time, she gets to choose who stands beside her. That may be the biggest plot twist Sister Wives fans could have asked for. And if Pete really is the beginning of Janelle's next great chapter, then the story we thought was ending with Kody may have actually been the beginning of something completely new.